Did you miss us? You missed us. Happy politics. It's 2022. Happy New Year. This is BC Poly Hotstove. My name is Maclean K. I'm the editor-in-chief of this fine site that you all missed so much, the Orca, and I'm joined in a socially distant manner by...
It's Jordan Bateman, VP Communications, Independent Contractors and Businesses Association, the mighty ICPA.
Now, Jordan, when we last left our heroes, which is us, we had resolved to not talk about COVID-19 in our last episode of 2021. And of course, that means we have to lead off the show with COVID-19.
COVID-19. And really, it's a tale of two provinces, Ontario and British Columbia. Two provinces united by confederation, but dealing with the COVID virus in radically different ways, Maclean. One locking down, throwing away the key, and the other one wanting desperately to get out of the provincial health order business. You could not have more contrasting approaches at this point in the pandemic than you have right now between Ontario and BC.
Yeah, and if you had walked into this blind, after being asleep for the last 2 years, you might be forgiven for thinking that Ontario's Conservative government was the one saying, no, let's just ride out the storm. And BC's NDP government was the one saying, lock everything down, everything, the lives are worth more than the economy, et cetera, and so forth. It's actually kind of interesting that it's turned on its head and probably spared us a lot of really inaccurate and bad political commentary. But where we are in BC, yes, we are. I have a 6-year-old who's not in school right now. He's over there being very good. Hello, Ian. And we'll see how long that stays. And he's supposed to be back in school next week. I'm not particularly optimistic that's going to happen. And in Ontario, yeah, schools are closed. Everything's closed. Here, it's just gyms. I shouldn't say just gyms, but that's the thing that's gotten the most attention. Yeah,
schools in Ontario, though, are offering remote learning, which is more than we're seeing this week in BC. Just back to your point about, the Conservative government being the one to, exercise excessive government control and the lefty government being the one to exercise free will. Don't you think this is a only Nixon can go to China kind of thing?
Yeah, very much so.
I look at, you hate to look to the States all the time, but you look to the States because they are a laboratory of democracy as far as, 50 different states with 50 different approaches. You look at the criticism that DeSantis got in Florida for basically keeping things as open as possible for as long as possible. And he's a Republican governor. And, the Republicans really have become the party against lockdowns, and the Democrats are the party of lock everyone away until, we're at 0 cases. That wouldn't fly in Canada.
No.
The media would just pile on either side. So I do think it's kind of funny because the Horgan government then has... they couldn't go to the draconian kind of lockdowns of Ontario because they'd be accused of big government and killing the economy and all those things that get them unelected, many times in their history. And just like in Ontario, the progressive Conservatives can't do that, can't do whatever it takes to keep the economy going because, again, that's what gets them unelected in Ontario. So it is kind of one of those only Nixon can go to China type things. When it comes to schools, I think I'd have a lot more patience for this if, teachers had been subject to the same vaccination rules as the rest of the public sector, including healthcare workers. We talk about shortages of healthcare workers because of illness. There's also shortages because, a small percentage are no longer working there because they have chosen to exercise their right not to take the vaccine and at a much higher personal cost than most people. Who haven't taken the vaccine, losing their jobs. It's difficult for me to understand why it would take 4 full days for them to get schools up to snuff when they just did this last year. Yesterday, Dr. Bonnie's press conference was, essentially, hey, businesses, get prepared to lose up to a third of your employees at any given time. Dust off those contingency plans. Dust off those plans you made last year, those safety plans. Well, schools, dust off the plexiglass. Dust off the same plans you had last year. They get 4 days off to basically pull this together. Businesses have to do it sort of overnight on the fly.
Yeah.
It felt like a real gentle sop to the teachers union, to be honest. But, at the same time, like the teachers union wants school to grind to a halt and never return. This feels like sometimes, I know they do. Of course they do. They want schools, obviously, they want to be educating the kids, but it has felt like at times in this process that really they don't. And that's a difficult kind of balance to walk out, I think, if you're an NDP government.
Can we talk about the thing that got the most?
Yes.
Well, a lot of things got a lot of reaction yesterday, but the
David Malco.
Yes, Dr. Bonnie Henry said she wanted. I think the quote was directly, "I want to get out of the order business," and it was in context, saying, she's not, doesn't want to. I don't want to give public health orders ever. It was mostly, I want this to end, is what I took from that. Don't we all want Dr. Bonnie Henry to be in a position where she's out of giving public orders? I would very much like to. I hope this will not be misinterpreted. I would very much like to not see her for a long period of time, and I'm sure she feels the same way.
Yes.
No public health officer wants to be, directing public policy for a long period of time because it means things are going badly. Yeah. So to act like, I saw someone tweeting, a political scientist in Ontario who's prominent, has a big Twitter following, called Dr. Bonnie Henry a sociopath for saying that.
Really?
And that she should resign. Yeah. Emmett McFarlane, and that she should resign in disgrace.
Oh my God!
Don't we all want our public health officers to kind of fade gently into the background isn't that what we all want? I'm not saying today.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, of course, I would be very suspicious if they were saying, well, this should be permanent, because there's diseases around every corner, and so this should be a new normal thing. No, I don't think anyone wants that.
I've done a lot of media interviews in my life, and I've watched a lot of media, obviously. And I was a trained reporter at one point, and Langara College grad, class of 96, and was a community newspaper reporter. There are times when questions happen that reveal more about the bias of the asker than an actual request for information. Malco is a great reporter. There's no doubt about it. He's won multiple Emmy Awards. He's done great work. I'm not bashing Malco. But at the same time, I was watching the news conference live because I sort of half expected more orders and, more stuff to happen. I thought maybe they would shut the Canucks down completely and all this. And she didn't. And, Zussman, I think, had the first questions and, asked the classic Richard questions, which is, putting 8 questions into one and then 7 questions into a follow-up.
He's good at that.
Yeah. And, then Malco comes on and Malco, it was kind of like Jim Acosta versus Donald Trump. My jaw is on the floor. That's literally what he says in the press conference. My jaw is on the floor, Dr. Henry. I can't believe you. And I was like, oh, it just felt so grandstandy. And I'm with you. Like, Dr. Bonnie's been nice. It's been great getting to know you. I'd prefer if I never saw you again. Because it would mean everything in BC was going tickety-boo.
Exactly.
And I'm sure she'd be more than willing to not have us talk about her again on Hotstove or any other platform or ever. Yeah. Like, fade into the sunset and, thank you for your service. Here's your hat. What's your hurry? But instead, oh, my jaw's on the floor. No, we want her out of the public order business because that would mean things are going properly and people are acting in a healthy, responsible way. It felt very Jim Acosta light, that question. And he's made a lot of hay of it on Twitter. And my jaw is still on the floor. Yeah, we get it, buddy. Your jaw's on the floor. We get it. You were surprised. But I, for one, it gave me. It actually heartened me a little bit, encouraged me a little bit that, okay, Dr. Bonnie wants to get out of this. She wants this to be over. All right. And of course she does, but sometimes you need that little reminder.
Yeah. No, I mean, no one wants this to be, how do I put this? We all want the state of emergency to be over. We all want things to go back to normal. And I would be suspicious, I think is the right word, if it looked like Dr. Bonnie Henry or Dina Hinshaw, or whatever the name of the guy is in Ontario, looked like they were loving giving public health orders that shut things down. That would be problematic, to borrow a phrase. And so, I want people exercising this power with, reluctance and a bit of, not whatever the opposite of glee is. That's what I want. I want the sense that they don't want to be doing this, because that to me is reassuring.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Like, watching that news conference, I was struck at how utterly exhausted Dr. Bonnie looked. She looked there was circles under her eyes, and she looked tired. And I'm coming off, yesterday was the second day back after 13 days off. And, I'm very lucky to have the privilege to have 13 days off over Christmas and New Year's. We didn't travel anywhere, so you had lots of vacation days left for, soft white collar workers like me who have that privilege. Not everyone does. And Dr. Bonnie normally would. I know from working on government stories and in past lives that generally Christmas, New Year's, a lot of those senior executives in government agencies empty out, they go places, they don't work. Clearly she was working throughout this.
Oh yeah.
There was no great, maybe she got some time off briefly at Christmas, but she's still getting reports, she's still getting updates. There is no reprieve for Dr. Bonnie. And, yesterday I just felt like, it was wearing on her, and she had the good decency not to reach over the phone lines and strangle David Malco. And, in her general good graces, and, even she's done so many of these briefings now and had so many of these questions now that I think there are no more rough edges on her when it comes to media handling. So there are no more crazy questions. But for me, that was the only time my jaw dropped was at the jaw dropping comment.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded more like question period, I think, than,
yes.
A news briefing. But, I mean, we're all weary.
Yes.
And you're quite right to point out he is an excellent reporter. It's just, sometimes these things jump out.
Yeah, and look, excellent reporters, ask hard questions and stir the pot. I'd prefer if they stirred the pot the other way a little bit on some of these questions. Boosters, for example, they've been late. There are people who are closing out 7 months, still don't have their notifications. There are people who, Rob Shaw made this point in New York this morning. There are people who, are less than 6 months and are getting invites. My booster's set for January 12th. Then there's the problem with the fact that only a third of kids who are eligible have actually had the shot. And that means there's clearly vaccination hesitation there for a lot of parents. Yeah. Look, our 11-year-old son, not ours, Maclean, my wife and not your my 11-year-old son.
Other news.
Our 11-year-old has his first shot. I would take him tomorrow for a second if it was open, and we could. We have to wait for the email to come in. But, you talk to a lot of people, a lot of families, and this is a hard one for them. To take a prepubescent child in for this vaccination that they don't really feel comfortable with. And a lot of people grit their teeth and did it for themselves and, did it for their, for their elderly parents and stuff. But the death rate for children, thank God, has been so low with this disease throughout that it changes the risk calculation for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Like
you, I also took my son in for his booster, the second it was offered, and would happily take him for a second. And in fact, he was very proud of getting his booster.
Yeah.
He still tells random grocery clerks that he got vaccinated. This is all good. So what is a long way of saying that we are not an anti-vax family. That said, when I got both of my doses, I had some pretty gnarly side effects, especially the first one. That was an extremely rough ride. And so if that happened to other parents, I can imagine that little, even subconsciously playing into it's your turn to get your shot, buddy. I'm not saying I would recommend it. I'm saying the opposite. I'm just saying I can understand that little hesitation because, again, in my case, the side effects were terrible. And I felt terrible taking my son in thinking the next 48 hours may suck for you. We're still doing this, and it's still a good thing, but the next 48 hours might suck.
Yeah, that's a good point. For us, the other thing from the press conference yesterday was the comment that, businesses should prepare to have up to a third of their workforce off at a given time because of COVID. And so, I'm like, oh, okay. And then it sort of struck me, wait a minute, she's really saying that we can expect at least a third of people at any time to have this. And that is a sobering number. And I think last week she said basically everyone's going to get this particular variant.
Yeah.
It's almost unstoppable. And that is, for someone who, look, we've all done risk calculations. Now we're going on Twitter, and there are people who have followed every rule religiously and have it. Jack's little hockey team, 3 kids had it over Christmas, not from each other, from separate exposures. Another one is getting tested today, and it's starting to spread. Everyone now knows multiple people who have had it. Um, it's changed a lot in the last year and a half as far as public awareness. But, on the bright side, I think a lot of the terror is gone in that, we know lots of people who have recovered.
Yeah.
And yes, there's been, I think, 3,000 people who have passed away. But that is a smaller number. It's harder to know statistically those people. Then, you're far more likely to know several people who have recovered from it, who have had mild symptoms and gotten past it. It's just interesting to see how the dialogue now is changing here in BC.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We talk a lot about lagging indicators with COVID. There's one we don't talk about, which is that our obsession with the case counts. Now, we were conditioned for almost 2 years to look at the daily numbers and say, well, this is a direct indication of how our province is doing, and I'm using the air quotes for those of you listening on Spotify, is doing with COVID, because that's how we can tell. Now, the case counts are kind of meaningless because testing's maxed out, so we can't possibly know as the true number. Dr. Bonnie herself has said that the real number is probably at least 3 or 4 times higher day to day in terms of our case count. The only things that matter are maybe positivity rates in testing and definitely hospitalizations and deaths. But we're still looking at these numbers, even though we know they're not accurate and even kind of meaningless, because you're right, saying that businesses should expect a third of their workforce to be down at any time is kind of an admission that, maybe a third of the population could well be infected. So whatever today's case count numbers are, it's a slice of a slice. So they don't really matter, but we're still going to, wring our hands over them.
Yeah, so you're saying the real loser in all this is Justin McElroy's graphs?
Well, no. I mean, I would never take that away from Justin or his audience, which includes me. But yes, the case counts, I would argue, are essentially a meaningless statistic at this point.
Yeah, no, I would tend to agree. And, it's borne out by the fact that, so many people who are suspect have COVID or suspect themselves of having COVID, but aren't bothering to get tested because testing is overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the frustration is over the lack of rapid tests. Although I'm told now that it's a myth that there's a warehouse of rapid tests out there somewhere. Although there must be somewhere.
Warehouses?
Yeah, there must be.
We know the province has them. They've admitted to having them, and they're admitted to not handing them out, but then object to the suggestion that they're being kept. I mean, one of these things isn't true, and we know that they're there and not being used.
If I could draw, I would do like an editorial cartoon of there's no warehouse of tests, and then it's like Dr. Bonnie's desk, and there's like thousands of tests all under her desk, and she's kind of up on top and like typing away.
It's an abandoned mine, not a warehouse.
That's right, exactly. An abandoned mine. throwing it in John Horgan's backyard. He's got it all stacked up, and Mrs. Horgan's looking angry. Like, clean this mess out, John. There's a lot unfolding. Look. The other thing that's going on right now is, and this is an internal dialogue we're having at ICBA, is like we have a number of events planned between now and April. Some on mental health. We're taking Corey Hirsch around to 6 cities in BC. And we've booked rooms where we can easily have 50% capacity and still be at about 50 people. And, it's hard. The provincial order says we can do it. We know that mental health is such a key thing in construction, not just now, but for the past few years. But at the same time, the truck loggers, who are no shrinking violets, canceled their trade show and convention in Vancouver for next week. So you have all these groups and kind of going like, should we, shouldn't we? For us, we're gonna do it because we can do it safely and we can do it limited capacity, and we think mental health is too important an issue to ignore, because we've done some polling of our companies, and 96% of the companies that we talk to consider the mental health of their workers to be worse, substantially worse, or just the same as it was pre-COVID. Only 4% have seen any improvement since pre-COVID.
Wow.
So we got to get out there. We got to talk about these issues, or there's going to be a whole different kind of, well, there already is, with opioids and self-medication and alcoholism rates and suicide rates. But we got to go out and talk about these issues, or it's too late. But these are the trade-offs that companies, associations like ours are having to make and discuss, and that's why I think I was heartened by she wants to be out of the order business, because for ICBA in construction you're constantly trying to reduce the risk as far as safety of workers. You want workers to be as safe as possible. Is the number one thing. Get them home safe every single night, and that means safe mentally as well. And then, ICBA, we also have a big group health benefits program. We're one of the largest benefit providers in Western Canada. And, for there, it's, again, health, risk management, all those things. So, what she's saying is, like, after 2 years, folks, you're a little bit on your own, but you're very educated on your own. And, start determining the risks that are important to you. So I, for one, did not have my jaw dropped.
No, we're being released back into the wild in some respects, but you're right. We've had 2 years of training, and I think everyone knows how to do risk calculations, as you put it, because we're doing them every single day. Yeah. And we're going to have to, especially for the next couple months at least. But at this point, I mean, it's been 2 years almost. So
yes,
what's another couple months?
Yeah. Exactly.
Let's talk about something else. For the love of God, let's talk about municipal politics.
Yes.
There will be elections this year across BC. We know several prominent mayors will not be returning to their jobs because they're not running again. Jonathan Cote in New Westminster and Lisa Helps here in Victoria. I will add another one who doesn't know that he's probably not returning. And that's Surrey's Doug McCallum. He is standing for re-election, but I mean, let's be honest, it doesn't look great. And you can tell because there's a lot of jockeying for people to get recruited or being seen to get recruited. There was a story about the Minister of Labour, Harry Bains. But as you pointed out, and I have heard this from others, Jordan, that's not really the name to watch in Surrey.
Yeah, so Harry Bains is getting a lot of press right now because I think he's willing to talk about it, to be honest.
Yeah, and he's a cabinet minister. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah,
it's Labour minister, a longtime Surrey, I believe Surrey Newton MLA, and well-known figure here in Surrey. I live in Langley, but I'm here based in Surrey, as I record in my Surrey office. But the name I keep hearing all over the place in Surrey is Sukh Dhaliwal, and Sukh Dhaliwal is a federal Liberal MP, longtime MP, federal Liberal MP pre-Trudeau. And
that's right.
For a while there, Sukh would win his riding, which was I think Newton North Delta, very, very swingy riding. Like this is as swingy got back then. And when it'd go conservative, then it would go Liberal, then it would go NDP. And Sukh started winning more than more than the Liberals would be losing in that riding, and now has made it into a very safe federal Liberal riding. And it's all, you can talk about Trudeau and Trudeau waves and all that stuff. This is all about the hard work, door to door, organization to organization, constituent to constituent that Sukh Dhaliwal does. Never been a cabinet minister, I don't think.
I don't think so.
So never on the front benches, but like vital, absolutely key to the federal Liberals machine in the Lower Mainland, and someone who's carved this out. Longtime relationship with, longtime friend of Christy Clark's, longtime friend of Kevin Falcon. Sukh, Kevin Falcon, and my boss, Chris Gardner, here at ICBA, were key in those early set days with then Mayor Doug McCallum, and then, helping Diane Watts in the Surrey first years, post Doug McCallum, but then pre-Doug McCallum again. McCallum kind of comes and goes.
The Doug McCallum interregnum.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to 10 years from now when McCallum returns again and runs as a 90-year-old and wins to be mayor of Surrey, I suppose. So, huge name, huge name. And not someone who, until very recently, had been talked about much as mayor of Surrey, simply because he's just been like an institution now as an MP. Yeah. But I can tell you, Sukh's calling around. Sukh's team is calling around. There is a lot of growing support within Surrey for a Sukh Dhaliwal mayoralty run. And he would be a very prolific, difficult to beat candidate. I'd make him the favorite even if he and Bains ran against each other. I know Brad Zubik on Twitter assures me that there's some sort of secret handshake deal between Bains and Dhaliwal that only one would go. I'm not privy to that. That's information, but Zubik's usually right on this stuff. But yeah, it's it's an interesting wrinkle in a race where I feel a little bad for Brenda Locke, the councillor who first defected from McCallum and then has done a lot of the spade work. I'm not sure how sturdy her support is. I'm actually meeting with someone today who'll tell me a little bit more about that, so we can talk about that next week if you want.
Ooh, yes.
It's an interesting development, and the interesting thing about running for mayor is that if you're an MLA or MP, you don't have to resign to run. Just take a leave of absence. You're not risking anything.
Yeah.
You can run for those different offices and see if it fits.
It's a little more complicated with a cabinet minister, but you're right. Your point still stands.
Yeah. I mean, obviously with Harry Bains, he'd have to step out of cabinet. Basically put the constituency office on autopilot.
Yeah.
But for a lot of cabinet ministers, that's kind of what they do anyways. Like they're so busy that their constituency assistant is probably the most important, is the real MLA doing a lot of that spade work. I've used spade work twice now in this podcast. So
you have, haven't you? Did some gardening over the break or something. And I'm gonna, if you'll indulge me for a minute, Jordan. The things I'm about to say, I know you know, but for the benefit of our audience, you mentioned Suk Dhaliwal. And a lot of people who follow politics and even who comment on it for a living, and I'm not talking about us, fail to appreciate some of the more important parts of politics that happens behind the scenes that nobody sees, things like organizing. And this is where Suk Dhaliwal is an absolute rock star. Regardless of your party affiliation, he is one of the absolute best. A lot of people look at election results, and you said this yourself, they'll see, the Trudeau wave, or, Michael Ignatieff was really popular in Surrey that year. And there is an element of that, of course, but a lot of the success and lack of success you see in ridings provincially, federally, municipally, happen because of people behind the scenes organizing. And Suk Dhaliwal and the team he keeps around him are actually, I'm going to go ahead and say the best I've ever seen myself, which is, you're right. He's been there and he's made a formerly swing seat into in a Suk Dhaliwal institution, which is, to quote House of Cards, it wasn't just a firm handshake. So if Suk Dhaliwal decides to run for mayor in the city that he has created a fiefdom for himself in, of course he'll be a significant player, because all the stuff that you don't see in politics that largely influences who you do see in politics, he's really good at that.
Yeah, I know, 100%. And I think very highly of Suk for those reasons. And, he's the person who, politically I don't always agree with. He's been very quick to stick up his hand for massive spending deficits, even in good times with Trudeau. But certainly respect. I've heard stories about Suk Dhaliwal behind the scenes, and they are almost always good. Seems very kind, very down to earth. So I'm curious to see where this goes. And maybe he's just kicking the tires and not serious about it. I think he kicked the tires at one point on a BC Liberal MLA run.
He did.
Which is sort of what makes me a little skeptical that there's some secret handshake between Bains and Dhaliwal, because he would be much closer to the BC Liberal side of the political spectrum here than the NDP side. But we shall wait and see. For Harry Bains, I think.
And they may just want to avoid a situation like Vancouver, where there's a million candidates, and with every successive edition, it gives the incumbents a bigger advantage, because the incumbency always has a minor advantage, even in Doug McCallum's case.
Yeah. By the way, in Vancouver, have you heard any the Jody Wilson-Raybould rumors have gone ice cold, hey?
Yeah, at least as far as I've heard, a lot of things went ice cold over the break. I was completely offline. But you're right. Those were... It's starting to feel like those might have been more speculation than actual rumblings, and that does happen a lot, especially in municipal politics. I haven't seen anything to indicate that that's a job she particularly wants. I could be wrong, but I've not heard that that's something that is a great burning desire for her, and fair enough. I don't think I'd want to be mayor of Vancouver either, but that I've heard nothing on that front.
Yeah, I haven't either. So maybe we flip a note to George Affleck, who's closer to the Vancouver scene, and we can hear about it in an upcoming Unspun.
So Jody and George, I know you're listening. This would be
a fascinating topic. They tuned out hours ago.
No, always listen till the end. And now Jody's going to correct you on Twitter as soon as you'll know when she's reached this point, because there'll be an angry tweet directed.
Jody correct me on Twitter? I've never heard such a thing.
Well, now it's definitely going to happen.
I'm always wrong on Twitter. Twitter is just a plaything. Hey, one other municipal issue I just want to call out really quick is I read an article, may have been in the Fin, about Princeton, BC.
Yes.
And essentially 80% of the costs of the repairing after the horrible flooding that happened there in November, 80% of the costs are covered by provincial taxpayers, but there's still 20% that's outstanding. That's $2 million.
Yeah.
And at first the headline was like, Princeton, taxes are going to have to go up 70%. I'm like, holy smokes, 70% tax increase. But that's what it would take to pay that $2 million.
Yeah.
So for the Trudeau government out there in Ottawa, you want to help, you want to do something tangible to help flooding in British Columbia? You're shoveling billions of dollars off the back of the bus constantly on every weird thing that happens. We're talking about $2 million to the people of Princeton to help them rebuild dikes, rebuild sewer, rebuild infrastructure, given the most devastating flood in their history. Find the $2 million in the couch cushions, shake it out, and do something right for do something right by the people of Princeton. They did not deserve to have a 70% tax hike to cover that cost. I'm hopeful that I know that John Horgan is still talking to the Prime Minister on various issues. Hope maybe he could take this cause up with the Prime Minister, because it's clear that the provincial government's done $8 million. Surely the feds could do $2 million for Princeton. Yeah,
the $2 million is couch change for the federal government, and so even in when they're not shoveling money out for the pandemic, I hope this gets resolved, because you're quite right. That is a whopping burden for the people of Princeton, who have already had a very bad year. Yeah. Well, and like I said, I read it. I'm like, holy, 70% tax increase. So I was thinking it must be hundreds of millions of dollars or something. $2 million. Yeah. I mean, geez, like we could almost do a GoFundMe for them, and it doesn't make any sense. And let's not leave them on the hook for that, because not only is there a tax bill, but there will be personal individual costs as they try to rebuild. Absolutely. And let's give them a hand. There'll be people who are taking out loans to pay that bill, and let's not do that. Yeah. We should end with the topic that we often end these with. And 1 month today. What? 1 month from today, it's all over. Is it today? 1 month from? Oh, it is. It's February the 5th. The BC Liberal leadership race is, of course, what we're talking about here. Jordan, I already admitted that I basically went offline over the holiday break. Where are we at? What's happened? What did I miss? Well, the scuttlebutt behind the scenes from various campaigns is that everyone's in third place. So you talk to the Lee campaign, they're right nipping on the heels of Ellis and Falcon. You talk to the Do campaign, you talk to the Litwin campaign, they're all in third place, except Stan Seapost. He's clearly in last place. Hilariously, a couple things happen. So every week, BC Liberal leadership candidates are allowed to send 2 emails to the membership list. And they do it through the BC Liberal platform somehow. I know this because Stan Seapost's Christmas message didn't have the proper preview coding, and it said, the preview coding was every 2 BC Liberal leadership candidates can send out 2 emails per week. And I was like, well, this is a weird email for Stan Seapost to be sending us. Clicked on it, and it was actually like a picture, like a little Christmas card. So more very strong organizational skills from the Seapost campaign here late in the game. No, there's clearly a lot of jockeying position to be third place. The general consensus is Falcon is leading, Ellis is in second. Seems like it's one of their races to win, although there is a school of thought that maybe everyone collapses behind the third place candidate and that person can leapfrog Ellis and then eventually Kevin. Not sure I'm convinced that anyone other than Lee is in third, but that is the buzz that's going out there. I will say this, though. We have moved from signing up members to persuading old members like me. The campaigns are now very much engaging current memberships. The membership list is frozen now, so they got to try to convince people. I got my first piece of actual snail mail from a campaign. It was from the, actually, do you want to guess which campaign sent it? Oh, man. I'm going to take a shot with Gavin Dew. Oh, Gavin Dew's too cool for snail mail. Well, I thought you were going to surprise me, so I went counterintuitive there. It was Ellis Ross. Okay. And the envelope says, enclosure official campaign documents, and will you join my team of campaign advisors and help deliver change that can win? And, for a guy who's not a politician, as he says in every debate, Ellis Ross sent me a very politician-y letter.
And essentially, it's like a big thing at the top. Will you join my campaign advisory committee? Chris Gardner in our office here, who is also a BC Liberal member, did not get one of these, so I'm holding it over his head that I can be part of the campaign advisory committee, and he cannot yet.
You outrank him now.
I'm sure it's coming for him. But essentially, a long survey on critical leadership issues that I can fill out and send back to Ellis in a self-addressed stamped envelope.
Oh, I always appreciate those.
Yes. So there you go. Very kind of old school sort of thing. Basically, the promise is, he'll make the BC Liberals much more grassroots focused. And this is proof of how I'll do it. Stuff like this. Also asking for money, but not giving to any campaigns. So, yeah. Because I'm a neutral broker here on the Hotstove. So, I am, however, now starting to get to think. Actually, I should read you some of these questions, Maclean, because they're
kind of. Hit me with a couple highlights. Why not?
Okay, so you have
people missed us.
Number 2, quote, woke culture and extreme political correctness are dividing British Columbians and must be confronted by courageous leaders. You can strongly agree to be unsure or whatever. Best way to overcome affordability crisis that has engulfed our provinces for the government to pursue economic policies that boost wages, such as reducing taxes for companies who give their employees raises. It's an interesting link to make there. Between reducing taxes and increasing wages. Like, actually, it sounds like he's actually saying stipulate the link in legislation. BC Liberal Party should change its name. It's wrong for politicians to disrespect our heritage by trying to cancel holidays like Canada Day and BC Day. Those who engage in acts of violence and intimidation, such as burning churches or tearing down statues, are not advancing true reconciliation and should be punished by our justice system. Government should do more to hold accountable municipalities that fail to act on housing affordability. Some interesting red meat issues, I would say here.
That's a good descriptor. Yeah.
Here in the survey, one that's kind of interesting. Public educational system needs to better equip students with practical life management skills and strategies, including in the areas of financial literacy, civics, healthy living, and economics. It's just funny to link all those together because
it's quite a grab bag there. I mean, I actually agree with the financial. I would have benefited, I think, from being better trained on how to manage finances, that kind of thing. We all walked into that pretty blind.
Yeah.
Then you add in civics and a few other things, and it gets to be. So just a completely different curriculum then.
Yeah, exactly. So interesting tact by the Ross campaign. I guess maybe designed for older BC Liberal members, which sadly I guess I am now. That's darn you, Alice Ross, for making me feel old by sending me snail mail. But I'm sure more is coming. You would think thereuld be persuasion pieces from all the campaigns if they can afford to mail the 40-ish thousand or however members there are. It's expensive, right? Like, it's $1 a piece, plus printing, plus envelope, all that. So you're talking, you're closing in $1.50, $1.75, depending on what you're sending. That is not a cheap. That's not a cheap send. So targeted ridings, I would suspect.
Yeah, that's expensive.
Yeah.
Well, Jordan, the people missed us for almost 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and we've given them a bumper-sized episode. I think this is a good welcome back present.
It is. Close your ears, Jillian. I'm happy to report that the Green Bay Packers are the number 1 seed in the NFC. This is a great boon for the team, which I co-own. And I congratulate our front office and our players on this wonderful achievement. And now it's on to the Super Bowl. We're just 2 chilly wins at Lambeau away from going to the Super Bowl. And I, for one, am hopeful. You, the Denver Broncos, have almost never been further away from winning a Super Bowl than they are today.
Accurate.
But perhaps future Bronco legend Russell Wilson will lead you to victory.
Hope springs eternal, and at the very least, let's hope Aaron Rodgers doesn't decide to take off his jersey and clothes mid-game and walk out on his team while they're playing, which we saw this weekend. It's never boring being a sports fan. I'll say that.
No, it is never dull, and that's why sports is undefeated, and why millions of us watch every weekend. Even games that we don't care about, you watch because you never know what could happen in the world of sports. Much like you never know what could happen in the world of BC politics.
Excellent segue, and a good spot to wrap up. For Jordan Bateman, I'm Maclean K. Happy politics.